There's hope tonight for companies worried about impending changes to business rates after the Chancellor said he was listening to concerns expressed by his own MPs. Many have criticised the Communities Secretary Sajid Javid, who they accuse of misleading them over the true impact of rises due on the 1st of April as part of a 7-yearly update. Some analysts have described figures provided by the government as from a parallel universe. So how do business rates work? Our business correspondent Adam Parsons is at Sky News Centre to explain.
Well, the origins of business rates go way back. There you go, to the Poor Law Act of 1572, when rates were added to property to help support those facing destitution. And the principle hasn't actually changed very much. A business pays tax based on the rateable value of its property. That want to be pretty high. So if you've got a high street shop, business rates probably hit you harder than, let's say, an online company that uses an out-of-town distribution centre. The government says 73% of businesses are going to see their rates either frozen or reduced, and that 600,000 companies will end up paying nothing at all. But some analysts claim ministers have underestimated those rises by up to 7%, and that will mean some businesses who expect a fall in rates might actually see them go up. Now, in terms of how that affects the whole country, the changes very are dependent on where you live. For instance, Redcar up there in North Yorkshire, the government says rates there will be falling by 28.3% in the next financial year. Copeland, where there's a by-election, rates supposedly falling by 21%. Good news for parts of the north, at least on paper. And the south, though, gets a little bit more complicated. Let's try Eastbourne. No change at all there in rates. And once we get into London, well, we start seeing some pretty impressive rises. In Islington, Jeremy Corbyn's constituency, rates up by over 30%. And in Hackney, even more, up there by 31.7%. The question, is this fair? Well, remember, the government has long talked of rebalancing the economy. So you might just paint this as a way of supporting businesses in poorer parts of the country through what looks like tax breaks.
Thanks, Adam. Well, the Shadow Business Minister, Bill Esterton, is in our Westminster studio, and here in the City studio is Debbie Warwick. She's head of ratings at Daniel Watney, a property consultancy that has conducted analysis on how the new transitional regime will hit businesses. Well, Debbie, let's start with you. You've done some research which suggests that there are going to be rather fewer winners from this revaluation than the government's been suggesting. How do you arrive at that conclusion?
Good evening. Certainly, we looked at a number of, all of the rateable values across the country. We did a study in particular on some retail premises, some of those larger retail premises across the whole country, and found that 5,000 of them should be facing a decrease in their rates bill. However, many of them won't be facing that full decrease or having a benefit of it until perhaps years 4 and 5.
And why is that?
Well, because we haven't had a revaluation for 7 years now, there are some big increases and large decreases to be found across the country geographically, very well spread, north and south, east and west. And those large increases and decreases are not palatable for businesses to bear. Sure.
But, I mean, you're also saying that some of the biggest falls, the properties seeing those falls, they won't get the full benefit for some time. Why is that?
Well, some of the larger properties are affected by something called transitional adjustments. So the government has a scheme which is very well-meaning. It cushions increases and decreases for all businesses if they're facing larger than average increases and decreases. And the larger properties are decreasing very slowly, so that, in fact, across the whole 5 years, they're not destined to see a 25% reduction. So for those who are hoping to see a 50% reduction, for example, they won't see it in 5 years' time.
Don't go cracking out the champagne yet. All right.
No.
Well, Bill Esterton, let's bring you in. What's actually wrong with business rates? I mean, the principle seems fairly sound. If you use expensive land, you pay more rates. If you use cheaper land, you pay lower rates.
Well, I think Debbie's just described the scale of the problem, which is that for too many years you've had one part of the country subsidising another, and then when you try and sort it out, it causes problems. But there are some fundamental problems too. I was talking to some newsagents today who tell me that they're affected by what's sometimes called double rating, where they have a cash machine in their shop. They pay rates on that on top of the rate, and somebody was telling me they pay £11,000 in business rates, and if they have a cash machine, it's an extra £8,000 on top. That's just one example, and fundamentally, what we've got is an outdated system, and I think that, and as Debbie rightly referred to there, we should have proper transitional relief to support those who otherwise are losing out with these changes. And I think in the long term we do need to overhaul business taxes completely.
In general, though, Bill, isn't it a good thing potentially? You could see business being diverted away from London and the South East towards other less well-off parts of the country. I mean, surely that would be good for the rebalancing of the economy.
We certainly need to rebalance the economy, but I think there are some problems that Debbie's report and the reports of some other consultants have shown, which is that the changes the government have announced aren't as good as they've claimed. So I think we need to see in the budget the chance of having another look at this and setting things straight. I had a constituent email me yesterday saying that their business rates are going to double. Now, we weren't expecting to see increases at all in my constituency, so something's clearly gone very badly wrong.
Well, Debbie, previously, when rates went up, the increase was capped in the first year at 12.5%. That isn't the case this time around. Would you like to have seen that reinstated, that previous arrangement?
Yes, I think it was a shock to most businesses that envisaged perhaps seeing a 12.5% increase, which was the maximum that had been seen before across the board, to suddenly face a 42% increase for some has been pretty devastating, I think.
I think the Scottish government's actually still maintained that system, hasn't it?
There's no transition really in Scotland.
Yeah, okay. What about... so the government says... David Gauke, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, said last week that something like 3/4 of all small businesses would either see a fall in business rates or no change. What do you think the number is like, more realistically?
Well, I think 20% of properties see no change in their rating assessment. So they effectively will see no real change in their liability next year, perhaps a slight decrease. But for the rest... they're going to struggle to actually see the decreases that they should have. Right.
Bill, you've said that Labour wants to have a complete rethink on business taxation, small business taxation completely. Does that mean that you're committed to doing away with business rates and replacing them with something else?
Well, that's why I said we need to look at business tax as a whole. I mean, clearly we've got to collect taxes to pay for public services, to pay for the kind of investment in infrastructure and skills that business needs, but we've got to look at how we collect it, because at the moment we have corporation tax. We've already got one of the lowest rates anywhere in the world, of certainly in the OECD, of corporate taxes. But we've got a business rates system unlike any other, almost anywhere else in the world as well. And I think the problem is, was it 1542 the date we were shown there, or something? Yes. Or was it? It might even have been earlier than that. It's a very, very old system of property tax, and I question whether it really is fit for purpose. It does seem that business taxation in this country is very much skewed towards favouring the few very largest companies, and you mentioned online in the piece we saw, and the fact that online businesses do very well out of business rates, and perhaps the time has come to overhaul the whole thing.
But isn't the problem with that? Large businesses have a choice about where they can be based. They're mobile, they can go anywhere else in the world, so corporate taxes have to be quite competitive. Whereas business rates, I mean, effectively, they're a tax on land. They're not easy to avoid. And that's a great strength of them, isn't it?
Well, the time's come with corporation tax to start collecting it where profits are earned, hasn't it? And this is a debate that's been going on for some time. Rather than being large corporations being able to choose to pay it in, say, Luxembourg or another jurisdiction, I think that the time's come where we get people to pay the taxes where they earn their profits, and that's the start of the process. And alongside that, we've got to look at exactly what is a fair tax system that collects taxes that are needed, but also creates the kind of level playing field that businesses of all sizes want and need so that they can thrive.